This is the U.S. Coast Guard's daring interception of a narco submarine in the middle of the open ocean, a few hundred miles off the coast of Colombia. In the year 2019, the sub was transporting 17,000 pounds of illegal narcotics through the eastern Pacific on its way north to Mexico and the United States. Counterterrorism experts have been sounding the alarm for years now that these kind of subs could be used to transport more than just party drugs. They could just as easily smuggle firearms, explosives, or weapons of mass destruction. Joke's on them, we already got plenty of those. You might be surprised to learn maritime smuggling accounts for roughly 80% of the total illicit flow of narcotics from South America into Mexico prior to entry into the United States. The DEA estimates 30% of that is transported by narco submarines. And considering only 10% are caught, that means over $9 billion worth of illegal substances reach the shores of the United States just from this single method alone. That's why it's important we understand the full extent and capabilities of narco subs and their intent. What actions are the Coast Guard taking to stop them, and how is the cartel building bigger and better subs? Scientists believe that the only thing that'll survive the inevitable heat death of the universe is durable Ridge wallets. That's a fact. I bet you were like me 2 years ago, skeptical of this video's sponsor, Ridge Wallet. I thought I'd try the wallet out once and that'd be that. But if you spot me at a Wawa in New Jersey, you'll see me pull out a Ridge to pay, and that's because they have superior functionality. 1, they don't get waterlogged. 2, they don't look or feel like a leather brick bulging in your pocket. 3, in this topsy-turvy world where our hard drives are overflowing, our drawers are filled with 16 different types of spoons we'll never use, it's nice to know one product isn't superfluous. It's nice to know there's one wallet that won't let you hang on to 14 months worth of receipts because your OCD won't let you let go. Ridge wallets excel at their job to keep your cards, cash, and keys organized in one durable place. That's why it's the perfect time for Ridge's special 11-year anniversary sale through April 1st. And make sure to get yourself a Ridge key case to organize all those jingle-jangling keys. Back with a lifetime warranty and a 365-day risk-free trial. You can send it back for a full refund if you don't love it. Head over to ridge.com/taskandpurpose through April 1st to save up to 30%, hua. A lot of people who first saw this viral video mistakenly thought these troops were Navy SEALs. In reality, this is the Coast Guard's elite unit called PAC-TACLET, which stands for the Pacific Tactical Law Enforcement Team. Based out of San Diego, they specialize in high-risk, non-compliant boardings and deploy worldwide as elite 8 to 10-man squads, called Law Enforcement Detachments or LADATs. Coast Guard cutters have their own permanently assigned boarding teams, but when there's a high chance of encountering specific threats, LADATs augment those teams with their high-speed equipment and training. They're essentially the Coast Guard's special forces that offer advanced capabilities as part of their deployable specialized forces community. How are they authorized to carry out these kind of missions? Because of what's called the Special Law Enforcement Authorization under U.S. Law 14 U.S.C. 89 and international treaties. All Coast Guard boarding team members have to fully memorize that act as part of their qualifications. What it means is LADATs are legally able to board foreign vessels in international water when there's reasonable suspicion of crimes in progress. All of this explains why the Navy sometimes brings Coast Guard LADATs along with them on patrol, because it kind of acts like a sort of loophole that legally extends the reach of U.S. legal jurisdiction without violating the Posse Comitatus Act. Now, the Posse Comitatus Act prevents the Navy from acting as a law enforcement entity by itself. That makes things like taking on the cartel on the high seas technically legal for the U.S. Navy as long as they use these Coast Guard boarding teams, and technically legal is the best kind of legal. Now, the legality is much more complicated than that, but I'm an infantryman, not a lawyer, damn it. How did the operation unfold? In June 2019, one of these LADATs was deployed aboard the Coast Guard cutter Monroe while they patrolled several known narco smuggling routes in the eastern Pacific. At 0800 in the morning, the captain of the Coast Guard cutter Monroe received intel that a suspected narco sub was detected 200 nautical miles away. It was likely spotted thanks to an underwater sonar device in nearby warships that can detect enemy submarines from miles away. The other option is it could have been an overhead drone. The cutter adjusted course to intercept the vessel and made way at full speed for most of the day to reach the suspected area before sunset. Once they were within range, the Monroe launched 2 small boats from the LADATs with other boarding team members along with a helicopter to speed ahead and pinpoint the sub's location. Even with directions from the aviation element, the 40-foot sub was so low profile that the two small boats didn't actually see the target until they were within 25 yards away. The Coast Guard's small boats approached from both sides of the submarine and warned the vessel to stop in Spanish, yelling "Alto su barco." But the sub didn't comply, even with both Coast Guard boats right up on side of each other. Water churned up by the multiple vessels started to flood the small boat, so the team decided to break off and approach the smuggling vessel from just the starboard side. Several of the reports of the incident state that warning shots were fired by the hovering helicopter crew with their mounted M240 Bravo machine gun probably, which is standard operating procedure. The 5 cartel members inside knew it was over and there was no escape, and the suspects were arrested and handed over to the DEA for prosecution. The Coast Guard cutter Monroe actually intercepted 14 separate drug smuggling vessels during its 3-month patrol in 2019, seizing over 39,000 pounds of narcotics in total, a street value of around $569 million. Vice President Mike Pence himself flew out to congratulate the crew and the LEADAT personnel as they pulled back into San Diego. But that's just where the story begins, because there's a major problem here. This mission barely put a dent in the cartel operations. Estimates state that the Coast Guard is only intercepting about 11% of the total drugs passing through the Eastern Pacific. The known drug running corridor is over 6 million square miles in size, and the Coast Guard has only a handful of cutters available to patrol that immense territory. The entire mission is part of a little-known Operation Martillo. It's an ongoing multinational anti-drug operation that started over 10 years ago in January of 2012, and it includes forces from Belize, Canada, Colombia, Panama, Spain, and the United States. Sounds like a heck of a party to me. According to the United States Southern Command, the mission aims to combat international drug trafficking and promote peace, stability in Central and South America. Between 2012 and 2017, nearly 700 tons of cocaine worth $8 billion and over 1,300 people were arrested. After that, the numbers started to go down due to the success of the operations, but also because the cartel are trying out new tactics. And now, in 2024, cartel are building even more sophisticated subs with longer ranges that are reaching the shores of Europe and beyond. This new breed of narco sub are a far cry from the flimsy vessels of the 1990s and early 2000s that were just as likely to sink as reach their destination. Even other US military branches like the Marines are starting to take note of the success of these mini submersibles in the Pacific region. Take a look at the narco sub that Colombian authorities captured in 2023. It was the biggest one ever found. At 100 feet long, these are almost like Russian yacht territory. And that's only one of 228 that they've captured in the past 3 decades. Sturdy, stealthy, and with ever-increasing capacity, the latest narco subs are venturing further out to sea to find new routes that go around traditional patrol areas. They did this is because in the 80s and 90s, the cartels must have been on something because they barely hid. They used overt tactics of running go-fast speedboats. In response to this, the Coast Guard upgraded their radar and interceptor abilities, which forced the cartel to go underwater. Smugglers have been using these kinds of submerged containers towed behind more conventional craft since the late 1980s. But building an actual piloted vessel that could make the voyage all by itself was an engineering feat that took law enforcement authorities by surprise. Built for a one-way trip, these independent narco subs have developed into several different classes. The latest models even have diffusers built into their engine exhaust systems to reduce their heat signature or run off electric motors to eliminate the exhaust problem altogether. Most narco subs actually aren't true submarines and are classified by the US Coast Guard as self-propelled semi-submersibles. Renowned naval expert Sutton further classifies these into 4 different types of low-profile vessels based on general propulsion type and width of the design. He's done an excellent job illustrating how these vessels are constructed. These LPVs keep as much of the craft below the waves as possible, with a fiberglass pilot house and some viewing portholes for navigation sticking above the water. Well-built models can have just 3 feet or less of material above the water's surface, which isn't a lot for radar to pick up even on a completely flat sea. However, this isn't to say it stops there, because cartels have also started building several models of fully submersible vessels, with just a tiny snorkel poking above the waves, or even a few true submarines that can travel up to 66 feet below the surface. But there's a major problem here. The fact is, we're talking about essentially homemade vessels from the cheapest materials available. There's undoubtedly hundreds of these subs that didn't survive the voyage. In March of 2023, Colombian Marines came across a floundering narco sub with 2 deceased crew members on board and the rest sick from the fuel's toxic gases that weren't properly ventilated. They're slapped together deep in the jungles and swamps of Colombia, hidden from the prying eyes of authorities. Investigators have actually identified certain design trends that individual builders like to incorporate in their builds, sort of like a maker's mark. Each one is estimated to cost about $1 million to create, and they take about a year to build. So they're a real bargain when you factor in that they can carry up to 12 tons of cargo, valued at $150 million. Narco subs can travel further than you think. Subs have been popping up in Europe since at least 2019, when the first one was caught off the coast of Spain. But European authorities believe that they've been making the trip for over 20 years. This was just the first time that they'd been lucky enough to actually catch one, and there's evidence subs are making it all the way to eastern coast of Africa as well. This could help explain all of the traffic of drugs leaving Ecuador recently and heading to Europe. These long voyages can take months to complete, so authorities believe the subs rendezvous with support vessels along the way to restock, refuel food, and water, like mid-air refueling except mid-sea refueling. Since their resupply submarines aren't carrying anything illegal themselves, they're just regular old civilian boats that are impossible to pick out from the crowd of normal maritime traffic. Sometimes narco subs can't make the final landing themselves though, usually because the delivery point is too close to a congested area where someone might spot the sub just through sheer dumb luck. In these cases, the sub crew will offload the cargo out at sea, either directly to a relay vessel or in a floating container to be picked up at a set time. Often it'll take several boats to deliver the cargo this way, to reduce the chances of the whole offload being discovered. But also because narco subs can carry so damn much of this stuff that civilian small boats just can't have the capacity to carry it all at once. Drug production is at an all-time high in Colombia right now. 230,000 hectares of land in 2022 was planted with coca bushes. That translates to 1,700 tons of potential cocaine production, a rise of 24% compared to 2021. This has caused instability in neighboring Ecuador. It's caused all kinds of hullabaloo that's increased the migrant crisis in the Western Hemisphere. With so much production, drug traffickers are increasingly turning to high seas as a more reliable method of transporting the vast supply to the most profitable illegal markets. As a rough metric of how popular narco subs are becoming among smugglers, Colombian authorities seized 23 of these subs in 2019, but that number jumped to 31 in 2021. Some of that increase will be better techniques at detecting the subs, but a jump of that much in just 2 years also clearly signals to us that more of these subs are being built each year. So how can the US possibly stand up to nearly undetectable boats, sailing unpredictable routes in a region as vast as the ocean? Fortunately, there's some hope on the horizon. It wouldn't even take a radical change in technology or tactics. Airborne radars actually detect the masts and snorkels of narco subs pretty well, thanks to their higher angle compared to shipborne systems. Able to see over the swells of open ocean, maritime patrol craft, and helicopters find narco subs on a semi-regular basis. But there are so few vessels covering such a wide area that there isn't always a surface asset that can move to intercept fast enough. The aircraft either has to turn back to refuel or the sub disappears into the night. Coast Guard Lieutenant Commander Stephen Brickley related the problem to trying to patrol an entire city with just 2 police cars. The Coast Guard is also in the midst of a modernization process, meaning the service is saddled with a lot of 50-year-old platforms that aren't fast enough to intercept multiple contacts in a short amount of time. The most straightforward solution is to increase the size of the Coast Guard. Despite being America's premier maritime law enforcement agency, the US Coast Guard is the smallest and least funded of the military branches, and the service has to fight tooth and nail for every dollar of its budget. But it's difficult to grow their size when one Legend-class cutter, like the Monroe, is around $670 million. One suggestion is to turn the Navy's controversial littoral combat ships into Coast Guard vessels if they're not going to use them. But the Navy guards its platforms from being commandeered by other agencies. But if you can't beat them, join them, right? That's what one Marine Corps publication suggested. It suggests that the US military might steal the idea of the narco subs for themselves. The Marine Corps is building a solution based on those narco subs because they expect that a potential hot war with China would see small groups of Marines distributed across island chains to disrupt and deny Chinese fleet movements in the Western Pacific. But the Marines would be operating in a denied environment themselves. Supplies from traditional sources like air and sea lift might not be possible in the most contested zones. The covert logistics concept builds off the hard-to-detect nature of narco subs and adds all the sophistication and technical capability of a modern military to come up with a truly ingenious solution for supplying forces deep inside a naval conflict zone. Analysts assess that without an aerial surveillance platform to help, surface vessels have just 5% of a chance of detecting an ultra-low profile vessel like this. There isn't just one solution to combating the issue of narco subs. The platform is just inherently sneaky, and traffickers always seem to be one step ahead of law enforcement. But there's also the nature of crime in general, and every successful interception of a narco sub sub by the Coast Guard and other agencies means literal tons of illegal narcotics won't be hitting the streets. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. I would love to hear what you have to think about this topic. Thank you for watching Spare Parts Army, and I'll see you again soon.